The world watched, electrified, as President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso presented not merely a travel document, but a profound declaration of destiny, the United Africa Passport. This was no simple bureaucratic instrument. It was a clarion call, a resonant summons issued to every African on the continent and to the millions scattered across the diaspora. "Come home," Traoré proclaimed, his voice imbued with the fire of revolution, echoing from the corridors of power in Africa, across the vast oceans to the Americas and the Caribbean. "Your time is now." This initiative was immediately understood as more than a new form of identification. It became the very symbol of a new era, a revolution promising unity, a restoration of pride, and a sense of belonging for countless souls long separated by the brutal mechanics of history, the arbitrary lines of colonial maps, and the deep reservoirs of inherited pain. From the bustling streets of Lagos to the sprawling avenues of Los Angeles, from the vibrant communities of Kingston to the heart of Kinshasa, the news propagated with the speed and intensity of a wildfire. In households across the United States and the Caribbean, people of African descent looked on with a mixture of disbelief and surging hope. For generations, they had sought a meaningful connection to their ancestral lands, a way to bridge the chasm created by centuries of displacement. Now, a single, potent document offered a gateway back to the continent of their origins. Social media platforms erupted in a global cascade of emotion, filled with images of families weeping with joy, their hands trembling as they grasped their phones, whispering prayers of gratitude. One young woman from New Orleans, her voice thick with emotion, captured the collective sentiment perfectly. "I never believed I would live to see this day. This passport feels like a piece of my soul finally coming home." For so many, this was not just a legal paper. It was the key that could finally unlock generations of anguish and begin the process of profound healing. The digital infrastructure buckled under the weight of this historic yearning. The official website for the United Africa Passport collapsed within hours of its launch, completely overwhelmed by a torrent of millions of applications originating from every corner of the globe. An online vigil began, as people formed virtual queues, desperately refreshing their browsers in the hope of securing their place. In Harlem, a local community center spontaneously transformed into a bustling hub for group applications, the air thick with a potent mix of tears and laughter, as individuals shared deeply personal stories of fragmented heritage and newly discovered hope. In Jamaica, a mother clutched her child, her eyes fixed on a brighter horizon, explaining, "This is our chance to build a future where our children know, without a shadow of a doubt, where they come from." The passion was palpable, an electric current of history bursting its banks to flood the world with optimism. Yet, this narrative was never solely about emotion. It was fundamentally about the reclamation of power, the reassertion of identity, and the radical reimagining of the future. President Traoré's vision was uncompromisingly clear: to consolidate Africa's 1.3 billion people with the millions of their descendants across the globe, uniting them all under a single, powerful identity. The United Africa Passport was the foundational step towards a far grander ambition, a United States of Africa. This future would be built upon a single currency, a unified economy, one continental government, and a truly shared destiny. It was a strategic masterstroke that sent seismic shocks through the foundations of global politics. The old colonial powers watched with mounting anxiety, unwilling to relinquish their centuries-old influence, while their analysts whispered dire warnings of economic collapse, should Africa ever achieve genuine unity. But Captain Traoré stood firm, his voice a steady beacon of defiance. "We are not asking for permission," he asserted, his words sharp and fearless. "We are demanding our rightful place in history. Africa is rising, and no force on this earth can stop it." This burgeoning movement touched lives in the most intimate and unexpected ways. In Chicago, a man named Marcus, who knew his grandparents had been forcibly taken from the lands of what is now Ghana, broke down completely during a live television interview. "For the very first time in my life," he managed to say, as tears streamed down his face, "I feel like I actually belong somewhere. The DNA tests that were cleverly integrated into the application process began to weave together the frayed threads of history, revealing incredible stories of migration, profound loss, and indomitable resilience. These reports connected individuals with specific tribes, with villages they had only dreamed of, and with ancestral histories that had been violently erased. The effect was transformative. If you believe in Traoré's vision for African sovereignty, hit that like button and share this story to help spread the truth about Burkina Faso's awakening. Long before the dramatic public unveiling, the concept of the United Africa passport had been quietly taking shape in the strategic mind of President Ibrahim Traoré. Raised on the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, he had witnessed firsthand the deep fractures that colonial borders and decades of relentless foreign interference had inflicted upon the African continent. He grew up nourished by the stories of his grandparents, tales from a time before the maps were redrawn, a time when great African kingdoms thrived in unity, fostering rich trade and vibrant culture. For years, Traoré meticulously studied the complex patterns of migration, identity, and the diaspora. He observed with empathy as millions of African descendants in the Americas and the Caribbean grappled with a painful crisis of belonging, caught in a liminal space between the land of their birth and the distant land of their ancestors. Many had attempted to return, but without any formal pathway, their journeys were often fraught with bureaucratic obstacles and deep heartbreak. Traoré dreamed of the day he could tear down that barrier for good. The idea was first floated during a clandestine summit of African leaders, held in a remote village near the Burkina Faso border. It was a gathering deliberately shielded from the outside world, a meeting of revolutionaries, Pan-African visionaries, and patriots who shared a burning desire to rewrite the continent's destiny. Before this select group, Traoré stood and delivered a passionate address. "If we do not claim our identity as one people," he argued, "someone else will continue to decide it for us. This passport will be the key to unlocking our collective strength, our unbreakable unity, and our sovereign future." His proposal was met with a spectrum of reactions. Some of the more established leaders were cautious, fearing severe political risks and unpredictable economic consequences. But many others were profoundly inspired, seeing this as the long-awaited opportunity to finally shatter the remaining chains of colonial division. Everyone in that room, however, agreed on one thing. The plan was audacious, perhaps far too bold for the existing world order to comprehend. Behind the scenes, President Traoré's dedicated team worked tirelessly. They set out to design a passport that would be not just a secure document, but a vessel for African heritage. Every detail was considered, from the Adinkra symbols of Ghana to the vibrant Nebele patterns of South Africa. The document was meticulously crafted to evoke a deep sense of pride and an immediate connection, a potent emblem of a reborn African identity. In parallel, a sophisticated digital platform was constructed, engineered to manage the anticipated millions of applicants. It was a forward-thinking system designed to integrate DNA testing to officially confirm heritage and unlock the rich, detailed tapestries of ancestral histories. Despite the monumental challenges, Traoré remained convinced that this was the precise moment Africa had been waiting for. It was a singular chance to reclaim what had been stolen, to unite a deliberately fractured continent, and to finally welcome home those who had been cast away by the brutal tides of forced migration. But as the ambitious plan grew in scope and detail, so too did the opposition. Foreign governments began to issue veiled warnings through diplomatic back-channels. Western intelligence agencies intensified their surveillance of Traoré's every move. International media outlets hosted heated debates about the project's implications. Was this passport a direct threat to global stability, or was it the dawn of a new, empowered era for Africa? The tension mounted steadily, gathering like a storm on the horizon. Nobody knew for certain what would come next, but everyone, everywhere, could feel the very ground of history shifting beneath their feet. And so, on that historic day when the passport was finally unveiled to the world, the globe held its breath. Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just the leader of Burkina Faso. He had become the voice of a continent poised to rise, and the architect of a revolution destined to touch every corner of the planet. As the United Africa passport rollout began to sweep across continents, an entirely unexpected series of events unfolded, capturing the world's attention and its collective heart. In Atlanta, Georgia, a young man named Jamal sat anxiously at his computer, carefully filling out the digital application. Like so many others, Jamal had spent his entire life feeling adrift, profoundly disconnected from the ancestral history that had been robbed from his lineage. The moment the passport website went live, he seized the opportunity, driven by a deep-seated hope that he might find a missing piece of himself. When the approval email arrived, it contained far more than a simple bureaucratic notice. It was accompanied by a comprehensive DNA report that traced his ancestry directly to the Ashanti people of Ghana. Overwhelmed with a tidal wave of emotion, he shared the profound news on social media. His raw, tearful video immediately went viral. For the first time, he said, tears charting paths down his face, "I feel like I belong somewhere. This passport is not just paper. It is my story. It is my family. It is my home." That single, powerful moment ignited a wave of emotional homecomings. In Kingston, Jamaica, a woman named Marka began to pack her bags, preparing to leave behind a lifetime of struggle. "I never, ever imagined I would get this chance," she said, her hands clutching her new passport as if it were a sacred artifact. "Africa is calling me back, and I am finally coming home." Airports across the continent became stages for scenes of incredible joy. Witnessing tearful reunions as people from the diaspora arrived to connect with long-lost cousins, to walk the soil of their ancestral villages, and to stand before the graves of their forebears. But amidst this outpouring of joy, a dramatic political twist sent shockwaves across the globe. A leaked video surfaced, showing a high-ranking United States official in a private meeting, outlining a clear strategy to undermine the passport project. "This threatens our influence," the official warned his colleagues. "We cannot allow a mass migration to occur under the guise of heritage." The leak triggered immediate and widespread outrage. For communities in Africa and across the diaspora, this was incontrovertible proof that the old imperial powers were still actively working to keep them divided and controlled. Do you believe Africa is finally breaking free from foreign control? Comment yes below. In response to the scandal, President Traoré addressed the world with a message of unshakable resolve. "We are not running away from challenges," he declared, his gaze steady and determined. "We are running toward our destiny. No force will silence the call of our people returning home." His words became an anthem, inspiring millions and sparking protests in major cities worldwide, with demonstrators demanding respect for African sovereignty and the fundamental right to return. The sheer emotional power of the passport was captured in one particularly viral moment. A large gathering of African Americans and Caribbean people at the historic slave house on Gorée Island, Senegal, standing together on that sacred, painful ground. They raised their new passports in unison, singing songs of freedom and reunion. The images flooded the internet, a vivid and poignant reminder that this movement was not merely about politics. It was about the profound healing of wounds that had festered for centuries. Families once violently torn apart by slavery and colonization were now finding their way back to one another. Strangers were becoming kin. A new chapter for the African people was being written, one filled with hope, tinged with pain, and illuminated by the promise of unity. The United Africa passport had catalyzed a revolution, not just of borders, but of the human heart. The escalating momentum of this movement sent tremors far beyond Africa's shores. Governments in Washington, London, and Brussels watched with undisguised alarm as millions of people applied for a new identity that directly challenged the post-colonial world order. Behind the scenes, leaked diplomatic cables revealed frantic discussions about the passport's potential to irrevocably shift the global balance of power. In the United States, senior officials grew fearful of a potential mass migration of African Americans seeking to return to the continent. The White House quietly dispatched envoys to President Traoré, urging him to reconsider the speed and scale of the rollout. American diplomats issued stark warnings of what they termed unintended consequences, including economic disruptions, a loss of the domestic labor force, and severely strained international relations. Yet, Traoré remained unyielding. "Tell them this is not a request, but a revolution," he declared during a tense international press conference. His voice was firm, completely unshaken by the thinly veiled threats and immense pressure. Africa will no longer be divided or controlled by outside powers. We invite our people home, not as subjects, but as equals, and as the builders of a new future. Europe was just as unnerved. Certain leaders expressed grave concerns about migration and security. French and British intelligence agencies immediately increased their surveillance on Traoré's inner circle, convinced a larger political agenda was at play. Reports began to surface of covert cyber attacks designed to disrupt the passport's digital platform, but these assaults only served to harden Traoré's resolve and prompted swift, effective countermeasures from his cybersecurity teams. The pressure campaign culminated when the United States government, coordinating with its European allies, threatened to impose harsh economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation on Burkina Faso. The message was unequivocal: halt the revolution or face the consequences. In response, President Traoré made a move that stunned the international community. During a live broadcast carried around the world, he called out the United States by name. "We will not be bullied or threatened," he stated, his eyes burning with conviction. "Africa is not your colony. This passport is the birthright of millions, and it will be respected. If you want to fight, we are ready." As the world watched, the battle lines were drawn. It was a clash between a rising Africa, increasingly united under a single vision, and an old global order clinging desperately to its fading control. Amidst this historic struggle, the United Africa Passport stood as more than just a document. It was the very spark of a revolution. As the dust from the fierce confrontation began to settle, a new chapter dawned for Africa and its diaspora. President Traoré's unwavering stance had paid off. His message continued to echo: "This is our time. Our ancestors dreamed of unity. We are the ones making it real. We will build a future where every African, everywhere, belongs." The passport had become a living movement of hope and reclamation. Across the continent, cities buzzed with a new energy as passport holders arrived, bringing with them invaluable skills, ambitious dreams, and a profound hunger to rebuild. Markets thrived, and communities blossomed with renewed pride. The backlash from foreign powers gradually softened, replaced by a grudging acceptance that this tide of history could not be turned. Some governments even began to explore new partnerships, recognizing that a unified Africa could no longer be ignored or suppressed. At a grand ceremony in Ouagadougou, Traoré addressed a vast sea of faces. Africans from every corner of the globe, united by a shared dream. "The United Africa Passport is our promise," he said, his voice ringing out over the crowd. "A promise to our ancestors and to our children. We will no longer be defined by borders drawn by others. We are one people with one future. Together, we rise." The world watched in awe as Africa reclaimed its story, its identity, and its power. It was a call to every African, no matter where they were born, to come home, to belong, and to build the Africa of tomorrow. As the sun set over the golden plains of Burkina Faso, the voices of millions rose in a single, triumphant chorus. Our time is now. Subscribe for more stories of African resilience. Like this video if it opened your eyes, and share it with anyone who needs to see Africa's true potential.